Councilman Chaddock.
What I'm trying to get at here is I want to solidly establish that we have signed something and even authored something that we're bound to as a treaty by our Constitution. Therefore, we should be following through. What I'm referring to is the fact that nuclear weapons are indiscriminate and that they are, by their very existence, a threat of mass destruction and therefore illegal.
Thank you, Your Honor. States relying on the affidavit from the officer in this case. It's an incident from August 6, 2012 at 7:12 a.m. On State Route 308 with a reference point of milepost 1 in Kitsap County, Washington. The allegation is walking on the roadway under 4661-250. Officer's report indicates that Mr. Chaddock was a participant in a nuclear weapons protest at the Bangor Naval Base, and that during the protest he walked onto the highway holding a banner to block traffic from entering the gate. The officer indicates that this was very dangerous and caused traffic congestion on the highway leading up to the gate. State submits that it is sufficient to establish the infraction.
I would like to say something, Your Honor.
You swear testimony, nothing but.
Absolutely. Coming to this podium as a layman, I don't understand all the in and outs of international law or treaty law. Those are things that I have studied some on my own, but I have no formal education. So if I misrepresent something by word here, please look more to my intent.
And Your Honor, if I can just briefly step in here, and the state would object to testimony regarding international law, international treaties, weapons, etc. That's a very important issue, and I understand that and understand why this organization exists. But this is a civil infraction where the allegation is walking on the roadway, and that's international law or treaties or opinions as to nuclear weapons is not a legal defense to that charge. I understand how it may inspire someone to do this action, but it's not a legal defense. So testimony in this contested hearing should be limited to the facts of the case, whether the infraction was committed, and then legal defenses.
And how do you respond to that objection, Mr. Chaddock?
I respond to that objection by saying that by denying me a chance to effectively defend myself, I feel that I'm not being afforded the proper opportunity. That important matters, as the prosecution has said, important, including the thing I can't talk about or the things that I cannot talk about being important, should mean that they are not excluded from my attempt to defend myself in my actions. Because of this, because of the way that, in my opinion, the law has been perverted to allow massive injustices to be committed, massive illegalities to proceed, and small infractions like this that I have supposedly committed be punished, that by allowing this dichotomy to exist, it invalidates the whole thing. And that there should be no validation to the charge against me if there is no charge against the base, if there is no charge under international or humanitarian law, which I understand I'm not supposed to talk about. Thank you very much, Your Honor, for your time today.
How do you respond to his response?
Well, Your Honor, I think his response doesn't directly address the objection. I think his response, though, without getting into the nuances of international law and international treaties, I think he did a very good job, an eloquent job of explaining, I guess as he said, the dichotomy, but what particular international treaties or international laws require, or it doesn't impact whether or not this infraction was committed. And there's also no legal defense to this civil infraction, that it was a protest or it was a justified protest. It's not a legal defense to it. I think his arguments are kind of a more systematic argument that more relates to, I guess, what laws we should or shouldn't have. But this is the law that we have. Here we're faced with the question of whether the law was violated, not whether we should rewrite the law or invalidate it.
So, let me summarize what I understand. It sounds like the state is objecting that an explanation of international law or treaty law from the perspective of Mr. Craddock is not relevant to the issue before me. And Mr. Craddock, your response, tell me if I've misrepresented you, but it reflects my state of mind.
Perhaps, sir. I'm not sure I totally buy into that. I hope it's okay that I continue this.
Why don't you then tell me in your own words why you think it's relevant for me to, for there to be evidence about international law and treaty law in this case?
I believe that evidence would point to the fact that, at the very least, the inconsistency that I've spoken of would be further illuminated. Again, I'm no lawyer. I'm doing what I can to try and show that my belief is that if you cannot, if the law does not treat all matters within its purview the same way, that it is broken and that it's questionable how it applies if it does not apply across all bases. And therefore that this charge is without basis because the law itself is broken. That's my argument.
Okay.
Maybe it doesn't make sense, I don't know.
I think it makes sense, Your Honor, and that's kind of what I was getting back with my rebuttal argument is he didn't get into a lot of detail as to what his beliefs of the international laws and what they require, but I think he did an excellent job of explaining, I guess, how that affected his state of mind, both into what he was doing that day, and he also explained why he, I think, believes he shouldn't be found committed of this without getting into long details of the international law. So I maintain my objection, and I think it's, you know, without him getting into that, it seems to me like he's still done a pretty good job of stating his piece and explaining why he thinks it shouldn't be committed, without going too much into irrelevant evidence for the offense charge.
It sounds like, from what you said, that the point that you want to make is that if it's lawful for certain injustices to take place, how can I be found guilty of this insignificant law?
Contradictions, sir.
Sorry?
Actual contradictions, in my view.
Contradiction between?
Between the fact that, for example, we have, okay, and here we go. This is problematic for me because I've been so limited in my ability to respond.
We haven't been limited yet. I haven't been.
Well, yeah, but I'm trying not to step on the prosecution's toes here by running over the first roadblock you put in front of me indiscriminately. What I'm trying to, you're going to have to give me a moment, excuse me. What I'm trying to say is that the inconsistency makes the whole thing questionable, if not invalid. That the fact that we made the Declaration of Human Rights, you know, that we made that happen in the UN. Was our intent not to create a document that guided our behavior as well as others? If this is the case indeed, then the laws that we helped, or the guidance that we helped promulgate at that time, we're ignoring that and we're winking at these great crimes, if you will, in this infraction here. It's supposed to be under the same code. If this doesn't work, how does that?
Well, you are right, I don't understand you.
I apologize for that, Your Honor. I'm trying to be as clear as I can.
I guess at this point, I'm not sure how your argument translates into anything that would be relevant to the charge. I think I understand the gist of what you're saying. However, I don't have any problem with you testifying why you did what you did. And if that if that involves you testifying about your state of mind about international law or treaty law, as you understand it, I don't have any particular problems with you doing that.
Mm.
Mr. Backus might be correct that it won't be relevant
Mm.
to a determination of the case.
Mm.
And to the extent I do understand what you're saying, I'm not aware of any legal theory that would render what you're about to say relevant to the issue here. It's not to say, like Mr. Backus has already pointed out, it's not to say it's not important.
Mm.
But the question is, how will it help me decide the case one way or the other? So my ruling is this: I don't have any problems with you testifying about what your state of mind was when you did whatever you did, but I'm not sure in the end I'm going to be able to tell you, well, it is relevant, and therefore I'm going to dismiss the case because of what you said.
I understand, Your Honor.
So with that in mind, go ahead.
Attempting to be as thoughtful as I can about this, because I get one chance to say it, pretty much. And I don't want to take a lot more of everybody's time, because it would be, in the end, I think, pretty repetitious. It's really basic, Your Honor. Perhaps I don't have a way to successfully contest the charge in a legal argument, because the law is not recognizing an argument that it needs to consider, and probably has many times, perhaps ineffectively, I don't know, but that there must be a consistency across the board if there is going to be real law. It only becomes, for example, when the chief attorney for the prosecution at Nuremberg talked about we must enforce these laws across the spectrum, otherwise this becomes victor's justice instead of law. That kind of attention to the whole thing and its spirit needs to be there. And I don't think that that's really being considered here. What I think is being considered, and once again, it's not about this court or you or him, but in general, that I think what's being considered is the demands of power, and instead of the demands of justice. And in that respect, I'm very saddened. My attempt to declare the charge invalid simply on moral grounds may not work. My attempt to say that if A plus B does not equal C, then how can D? Those things may fall on deaf ears here, but I think they're still valid questions, and I hope that somewhere, soon, that they attain the proper perspective in the whole discussion. And that is all I have to say, Your Honor. Thank you for your time, sir.
Okay, Mr. Backus?
No questions.
So I think the evidence proves by a preponderance that the infraction was committed. I think what you're offering as you put it, maybe not a defense, but your position has to do about the consistency across the board. If there's going to be, there has to be consistency across the board if there's going to be any real law, and your attempt to declare the charge invalid on a moral basis probably will not work. And I think you've summed it up pretty well yourself. I mean, you're stating your moral basis, your feeling about the law, and how if it's not consistent across the board, none of it really should apply to anybody. At least that maybe this law shouldn't apply to you. And I think that's a view of the law that I'm not sure is supported by any statutory case law or constitutional law that I'm aware of.
Well, I have to agree with you.
Yeah.
That the contest is based upon the fact that I think that there's things the law needs to consider more than, than perhaps that I simply didn't do it. I don't think that the charge is valid simply because of the structure that it's in. Let me put it to you another way. I believe that the inconsistency is glaring enough that it should be brought up in this way. It may not be a valid legal defense at this time, but I believe that in time, that it will.
Okay, why don't we do this? Are you staying for the rest of the proceedings?
I was planning on it.
Yeah, that's fine. Because what I was gonna do is I'm gonna say, I find the infraction committed, I'm gonna hold off imposing any penalty until we get to the very end, and so I can hear what the other cases are about as well. That's okay with you?
It's quite fine.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Point out that I'm a contester and I'm hitting international humanitarian law. And that's a pretty recent development that's taking place among legal type people. And I don't expect to be able to be too elaborate on that. I think because I'm contesting, they'll cut me off. But I think it's very important that we become more and more aware of what international humanitarian law says about nuclear weapons. And I got stuff with me, but more stuff at home about this. There's, I think 39 or 35 countries talking about this issue right now. Mexico is doing something
Doing
to
what?
deal with nuclear weapons.
To make sure they don't spread or to get their own?
To
There's
make
some
sure
guys
they
in
don't
Tijuana.
spread.
Okay, but
Could you read that? I know it's brief.
Yes,
Read it
yeah.
again.
It indicates that Mr. Meyer was walking on State Route 308, so he's walking on the highway after he was warned off the roadway. So the allegation is that he was walking in the roadway portion of the highway, and he was still there after he'd been warned off it initially.
Okay, and if you want to raise your right hand, do you swear your testimony is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Meyer, go right ahead.
Well, I appreciate being here and contesting this and the patience of the court and understanding what I was doing. I have a statement I'd like to read, and I know it might be a little testy at times, but well, let me start it. We live in a world of uncertainties, and humans create their share of them. The present experience of Hurricane Sandy is a prime example. Those denying humanity-caused role in climate change are learning the hard way. So often we live with illusions. I compare this to nuclear weapons. We are learning the hard way and not taking responsibility for our actions. As with climate change, if we do not reverse what we are doing, climate temperature will increase as much as 6 degrees Celsius in this century, eliminating life on Earth. So with nuclear weapons, the state could have used a number of statutes to charge us with, and has used in past times. All these statutes, I believe, have their place in the ordinary course of society, except one. I believe that nuclear weapons are ruled out by higher principles and law. Specifically, the 1996 International Court finding, and more recently, the 2010 Non-Proliferation Treaty UN Review Conference applied international humanitarian law to nuclear weapons as illegal. For me, these laws are applications of ethics and natural law. I am not here to get off the hook or receive special treatment. If my actions are injurious, I take responsibility. I believe that law is needed if abolition is going to be achieved. Nations must be able to trust the instruments protecting them. The law, backed by security mechanisms, protocols, and so on, are necessary. Unless the U.S. chooses a credible course rooted in law and security programs, nuclear disarmament will not be achieved. I am here to appeal to the United States government this court, and people. The legal profession has lagged behind the psychological, religious, and peace activist professions to address the morality and legality of nuclear weapons, or the nuclear professions. The threat of nuclear weapons hangs over our heads. As with growing climate temperatures, time is of the essence. I have been portraying Gandhi for nearly 11 years, 7 of them in India. Perhaps nowhere in the world is the threat more possible of intentionally using nukes than between India and Pakistan. We have the words of Gandhi. As Gandhi said the day before he was assassinated to Life magazine journalist Margaret Burke-White, quote, this is Gandhi, "Nonviolence is the only thing the atom bomb cannot destroy." I did not move a muscle when I first heard that the atom bomb had wiped out Hiroshima. On the contrary, I said to myself, unless the world adopts nonviolence, it will spell certain suicide for mankind. I have risked arrest because of a higher law. We symbolically blocked the access road to the platform releasing nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons which are a threat to life on Earth and are illegal. If the court believes I am guilty, punish me to the full. If the court sees the urgency and purpose of international law incorporated by U.S. law, including international humanitarian law, I ask the court to join the effort to save life. Until the court, Your Honor, start eliminating the red line between local law and international law, the necessity I am talking about here, the legal issues that I'm talking about here, will not be addressed in the court system. But I'm appealing to you and to the government to consider these things. Thank you.
Mr. Backus?
No questions. Your Honor, I'll make a few more comments just because this affidavit is so brief. I think it's basically acknowledged factually, though. The officer's report indicates that Mr. Meyer was walking along State Route 3, or on, I'm sorry, State Route 3, right, not along. He also indicates after being warned off the roadway. This all clearly indicates the allegation is he was in the vehicle portion of the highway. 4604-500 defines a roadway, which is the portion of highways or roads used for vehicular travel, exclusive of sidewalks and shoulders. So although the officer's affidavit is exceedingly brief in this case, it is still sufficient to meet the statute's prohibitions. Mr. Meyer clearly hasn't denied it today. His testimony actually acknowledged what they were doing that day. He explained why they were doing it. So the state would ask that the infraction be found committed.
Mr. Ryan?
Well, I just respond that, yes, walking in the roadway can be threatening, can risk people being injured and so on. But I have to add that we took extensive measures to prevent that through having people stop traffic, etc. So we took efforts that would obviate the purpose of the law is to save life and injury and damage and so on. So again, the higher law should speak first here, not this infraction, which we took every effort not to infract the real purpose of that lower law, the traffic law.
Well, I'm first trying to concentrate on the facts of what happened, and my notes state it was in the same location as the previous case. The defendant walked on Highway 308 after being warned off the roadway. Is that accurate as to what you stated?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Your Honor.
Defendant walked on 308 after being warned off the roadway. And your testimony included a statement regarding the facts, and let me make sure I understand correctly what you said about the facts. We block the road to save life, I think is what you said.
Well, to save life, definitely, that's part of the facts as I see it. The explosiveness of those weapons that we made, humans made, is part of the facts. So we're trying to stop that,
Trying to stop.
the use of nuclear weapons. We're appealing to people that control them, not just the people at the top, but everybody in between, including me. I'm doing my duty to stop the use of those weapons. We're appealing,
Okay.
and I've done that in many places, many times, and I will continue to.
Mr. Backus is arguing that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're essentially conceding that you violated the statute.
Yes,
And
I
this-
violated the statute, not intentionally saying I'm going to violate this particular statute. I just
understand.
missed arrest for whatever charge. Many charges could have been made by the state in addition or besides this.
Well, the statute states where sidewalks are, there's no testimony or there's no evidence at all about there being sidewalks. And so I'm assuming this is an area where there weren't sidewalks.
There were no sidewalks.
And that part of the statute that touches on areas where there are no sidewalks, it says where sidewalks are not provided, any pedestrian walking or otherwise moving along and upon a highway shall, when practicable, walk or move only on the left side of the roadway or its shoulder facing traffic which may approach from the opposite direction, and upon meeting an oncoming vehicle shall move clear of the roadway. And Mr. Backus is saying that you're saying, yes, that's what we did. And I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, because like I say, the only bit of notes I have here as to your testimony as to the actual facts are, we block the road to save life. And I'm not asking you to agree or not agree that you committed the infraction, but that's what Mr. Backus is suggesting, is that you are saying, yes, I agree, I committed this. The facts would support a finding that I did.
I'm saying we entered the roadway to save life. We took every precaution not to hurt anybody present in cars or walking. We had people with red vest on, stopping traffic, so that nobody would be hurt. So I walked on the roadway with a sign with other people to save life, as I described it.
Okay.
I think a good way to sum it, Your Honor, would be he admits the factual elements of the infraction, but he doesn't stipulate that he should be found committed of the infraction for his reasons that he stated.
Recognize the validity of the law, the local law and an international law. Both of them are valid in their place.
It's still not clear in my mind whether you are saying you or somebody else actually stopped traffic. And I'm not asking you to, you don't have to answer my question if you don't want to.
The question is, did I stop traffic?
That's the question, right? And because it seems to be you're saying, well, we did, and
Well, I held a sign in the road where I wanted the traffic not to go through while it was there. So go to a gate, to a platform for nuclear weapons, which that road should be used for other purposes.
okay.
And I think I think what he was saying earlier is he didn't want to just run out on the road with a sign for people to slam on brakes. I think what he was indicating before when he talked about the group is they had people to try and get traffic to slow down, or or basically to allow traffic to know that there were going to be people in the roadway, so it wouldn't be someone all of a sudden driving upon Mr. Meyer with the sign. They wanted to make sure it wouldn't become dangerous.
Does that accurately restate what happened?
Well, if you add to that the other things I.
Yes, and yeah, I'm not trying to discount the other things, but
Yeah, yes.
I try to focus first on the facts of what happened, because they may or may not support
Yeah.
the infraction, and if they don't, then we stop there. So again, in this case, I believe factually, the infraction was committed because that section 2 of the statute that talks about where sidewalks are not provided, pedestrians can do this, that, and the other thing, but shall move clear of the roadway if they meet oncoming vehicles. And I think that's what essentially you're saying that you did. And
The law is a good law.
sorry,
The law is a good law.
it's good.
I learned that in the Boy Scouts.
And so the only other comment I have, and Mr. Backus is saying, and I guess I'm not disagreeing, is that his argument in my ruling shouldn't be interpreted as minimizing your message. That's, one doesn't lead to the other.
Can I add one more point to that?
Sure.
Yes, your ruling could be understood as dealing with that road infraction, implying no agreement or disagreement with the international law. But I need to say that until the courts start changing the tide and the legal professions start changing the tide and the government start changing the tide, when are we gonna stop nuclear war? So to me, to find, yeah, guilty on this, but the reasons for doing this eliminate the guilt for walking on the roadway illegally, and send that message out to the world. We're having a hard time stopping the inevitable, or quite possibly inevitable, elimination of life through the use of nuclear weapons. And I could go into that in a lot of ways. I didn't bring all that evidence. I noticed it would take time.
Well, certainly there are limits on what the government can do, and
Well, we
What-
need the law. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
I was going to say what the government can do, what laws the government can write, and how the government can enforce the laws as they, as all that activity interplays with citizens' rights to express themselves and to protest. There are limits on what the government can do. But I'd be hard-pressed in this case to say that the activity of the government in this case prevented your exercise of free speech. I don't pretend to make any rulings on whether your message was or was not conveyed in the way you wanted it to be conveyed. I don't know. None of us know, probably. But the facts in this case don't lead me to conclude that, but for the enforcement of the government, you would have been able to express your point of view. It sounds like you chose to express your point of view in more than one way. One way was to be there at the scene and to display these signs. Another way was to have some people slow down the traffic and then have some other people be actually stopping the traffic to display the signs. And I'm not so sure that I do not conclude that the enforcement of this particular statute prevented you from expressing your point of view. I think if it was otherwise, we'd have a different can of worms, but I don't think that what happened here prevented you from expressing your point of view. So, with that said, I find the infraction committed, and if you are going to stick around for a little bit, we can get to what penalty, if any, should be imposed.
So you found it, so I
Well-
brought these copies for you, you know.
Well, you can certainly
see a
submit
need
them.
to submit them.
I'm sorry?
You don't see a need to consider these?
Well, you've told me what they are, and I take it the gist of what you're saying is, we had to do this. It was necessary for us to violate this law, and that amounts to a defense to the charge, which we admit we did. We admit we violated the statute, but we should be found not guilty because it was absolutely necessary that we do this in order to prevent annihilation of mankind.
To contribute to that?
Right, and the evidence doesn't take me from A to B. I don't agree that it was, that the evidence proves that it was necessary for you to violate this law in order to prevent the annihilation of mankind. It certainly, in your view, is an effective way to communicate your point of view about that. But the evidence doesn't suggest to me that it achieved the result. But I'm not so sure that your protest that day was necessary to prevent the annihilation of human life.
Gotta do something.
Well, yeah, I'm not.
I've been doing a lot of things legally and, say, in this case, illegally, I guess.
Okay, so if you're gonna be around, I want you to have a seat and we'll take up the mitigation hearings.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I don't know where to begin, it's a lot to think about. I haven't had the time to prepare, my thoughts like a lot of you have, just by the nature of how things unfold. I did make some notes here, and I'll probably move through them in a serial fashion, just because that's the way I wrote them down. Hope it makes a little bit of sense. Obviously, a lot of your statements are very thoughtful. You are a sector of society that is very passionate about those things that you hold dear, that you believe in. So passionate that you're willing to take steps like you did on that day, and I'm sure other days as well,